my veins. Blue in one eye, red, white, and blue in my brain. I'm Bulldog born. Bulldog, that's my breed. I was born to follow where the Bulldogs lead.
Welcome to Inside the Kennel podcast, ladies and gentlemen and boys and girls. We have the Kennel Master with us. We love to call him Mr. Footscray. We also like to call him Nostra Douglas, Captain Thunderbolt, arguably the greatest player, Bulldogs player existing. But ladies and gentlemen, I've got Douglas James Hawkins. Dougie, welcome to Inside the Podcast.
How are you, Paul? And how are you, Matty? Great to be on board, boys.
We're delighted to have you, Dougie, as always. And we've got some serious player on the podcast today. That's for sure. It's our games record holder. Dougie overtook you, believe it or not. It's Brad Johnson.
The great Brad Johnson, the smiling assassin, I used to call him. Matty, Paul, absolutely sensational player, fantastic bloke, even better bloke. How's that? He's a better bloke than a footballer. So that's a huge rap from me. Poor Matty, I remember the kid coming down. I reckon he might have started about 92, 94. Matty, did he start?
Yeah, that's right. He was with the Western Jets in '93. He was picked number 11 that year, and he debuted in '94. The week after you broke the record. So I think Rowan Smith went down maybe with a collarbone, and he was picked for Tony Shaw's record breaking the following week, you might recall.
No, did he, Matty? Okay, so he started in '94, and Hoppers Crossing, I reckon he would have been as a young kid playing. Great family, lovely. His old man's a ripper bloke. I think his dad might have passed on, Matty and Paul. But no, Brad Johnson, mate, one of a kind. And I remember early in '94, or maybe towards the end of '94, I said to Chris Grant, I reckon this kid might play 200. I was 200 short. 300. What did he make? 60. What did he play?
It was 364. Yeah, that's right. You know this, Doug. Absolutely.
Yeah, I do, Matty. I do, Paul. But at the end of the day, I'm still the Footscray games record holder, aren't I?
That's right. They can't take that away from you.
I can't take that away. But he's a Footscray Western Bulldog, so and a very worthy of that as well, boys. And just his ability to play on ball. Certainly can kick both feet without a problem. Had great balance. Very rarely went to the ground. Good overhead. Good below his knees. He ticked every box, didn't he? And I think Matty, Paul, that we off air we spoke, Matty, that and then he went forward. Like he must have kicked only 400 odd goals, did he? He must.
558, believe it or not.
So what did he kick, Matty?
558. So only the great Simon Beasley with 575 is the only player to have topped that goal kicking list.
God.
Gee whiz.
How many games did Simon play, though?
Simon, 157.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well, Beasley kicked the most goals from 1980 to 1990. Can you believe that? And everyone says Lockett and Dunstall and Ablett and these blokes. He was Simon Beasley with 575. So Brad Johnson, 500 goals as a 6-footer. He's no bigger than me, is he?
That's right, 6 foot exactly. So what a player for him to be a midfielder. Probably started on the wing, and half-back flank at times, and then just went right into the midfield, and then in his later part of his career, just to go forward and do what he did. Kicking 5, 6 bags of 7, even an 8, I think, against Geelong one day. So he could do it all, as you say.
Yeah, no, he could do it all, Paul. Matty, he could do it all. And again, I'll say it is a terrific bloke. What a great role model for young Bulldogs, future Bulldogs, looking at Brad Johnson play. There was none better. See, I'm just stunned. I'm stunned. You got me stunned, Matty, by the goals. It was a total of 500. That's just and he would have kicked them mainly when he went forward. So he would have went forward around what, 30, 20? What age would he have finished, Jono?
Yeah, he finished at age 34, I think, after that runaway golf cart got him in the back. So that's when it's time to give it up.
That was one of the trainers, wasn't it? Hey,
You
Paul?
can't trust them, Dougie, those golf carts.
Paul was one of those trainers, Paul, I think it was, that let the golf cart go and hit Jono. And, that was on the Whitten Oval, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was right underneath the shadows of the Whitten stand there. So I don't know what you're doing bringing a golf cart out there. Just carry the drinks.
Yeah. It's amazing. You look at his career and his ability to carry the footy was really good, wasn't it? He had that 10 metres at the start where he could really accelerate and get away. And again, a terrific overhead, both-sided. What else can you say about Brad Johnson? Which there's not a lot much more to say, but the word is he'll be. He's been made a legend of the Bulldogs yet, Matty, Paul?
He has. Yeah, that's right. It was this year, I believe. So he's joined you at the Bulldog, top of the tree, really. With yourself and EJ and obviously Chrissy Grant, and Schultzy. So it's an amazing accolade.
Yeah, no, it is. It's just fantastic, and his finals footy was pretty good too, wasn't it, Paul? Matty was. He was pretty good and you said, Matty, Paul, he must have played a fair few finals games, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Look, without having the stats in front of me, I think it was around 18. There may have been a few more in there. So, he had a pretty golden era, didn't he? That the late 90s was fantastic, and then we re-challenged, at around 2008, 9, 10, and he was in all those preliminary finals as well. So, he got an incredible run at it. But unfortunately, not unlike yourself, just didn't quite get to that last dance.
Just couldn't get the big one, Paul, Matty. Couldn't get to that. And since his football, he's become a very, very good media performer. And his work on Fox Footy's been outstanding. And he's maintained that role since he probably finished footy. So that'll be a few years now, Paul.
He's made for TV, I think, Dougie, with that smile, isn't he? Made for TV.
Yeah, you're right, Paul. And he's a warm character and very lovable. The one that you want your daughter to bring him home, wouldn't you? And that'd be Jono. But again, Paul, I marvelled at his ability to play footy. He made it look easy. A lot of guys can't do that. A lot of blokes can't make it look easy. He made the hard look easy. He made the hard look pretty. He looked comfortable in doing the hard stuff. Does that make sense? And that's a sign of a great player. Make no mistake about that. And players who can handle the pressure and the heat and make it look pretty comfortable. He certainly did that. He didn't ever look flustered. I think the one we remember is when who's the bloke who's still on his shoulders from Essendon, little Rover?
Harry Moorcroft.
Moorcroft. You remember that, Paul?
Oh, huge.
Yeah, I remember that, Mark. He's still playing, Dougie Moorcroft.
What footy?
Yeah, he's playing with his son, believe it or not.
He'd be 63.
Yeah, your age.
Didn't he stand on his shoulders that day at Marvel? Was it Marvel?
Yeah.
In the goal square. God, it was a big mark.
Huge.
We remember Jono for that? No, we won't. We remember for the 364 games and 500 plus goals, Matty and Paul. That title legend fits very comfortable with Brad Johnson.
Yeah, well said. Well, you know what? We've got the legend knocking at the door right now. I can hear him coming in.
Jono, you beauty, Jono. Woo-hoo.
Thanks so much, Dougie. One legend in, one legend out.
Strap yourself in, everybody. We've got an official club legends and games record holder, 3 times best and fairest, Bulldogs captain from 2007 to 10, 5-time leading goal kicker. Get this, 6 All-Australian Blazers, team of the century superstar and captain, the Hoppers Crossing Hurricane, the smiling assassin. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Brad Johnson in the house. Welcome, Brad.
Good evening. Thanks for having me on. It's awesome. I'm wrapped and Maddie's stalking me on LinkedIn to get me on the on the show. So you wore me down, Maddie, but here I am. No, it's an absolute pleasure. It really is to be on your show, guys.
Well, we have a philosophy, whatever it takes, Brad. So we've done it, and the fans are going to be over the moon. Now, we always start the podcast, Brad, by asking you, if someone Googles your name, a new Bulldog supporter, 50 years from now, and they say, who is this Brad Johnson, this game's record holder? How would you describe yourself as a player in your own words?
Wow. Describe myself as a player. Probably passionate, I think, is probably the best way to describe me as a player. And I suppose hardworking is the other aspect. Look, they're the things that I lived by throughout my entire footy career, and the other things just were bonuses on top of that. You know what I mean? And being able to represent the club for so long was a huge honour. But it was on the back of some serious hard work for 17 or 18 years, and even longer than that, actually, because you go back to some junior days as well, where you start to get a bit serious about where you want to go. So that's probably the way that I'd like to be remembered, and passionate about the colours, because I absolutely loved them as a kid and loved them even more as a player.
Brad, nice segue into your junior years. Tell us about your pathways to the Bulldogs. Where did you play as a junior? Who were your influences? Who were your mentors? Who were the coaches that left a mark on Brad Johnson, including family?
Yeah, look, I started at Hoppers Crossing in under 13s, was my first year of footy. Before that, I was into basketball, and little athletics was probably my favourite sport. So, just going down to Werribee and running on the grass and having some fun down there. So I loved doing that. So I couldn't do it all. So footy was something I always loved, and it wasn't until under 13s that I started playing at Hoppers Crossing. So I went down pre-season and tried out one year, and away we went from there. So Gordon Orchard and Ray Kavanagh were my two coaches at Hoppers. Gordon for under 13s and 14s, and Ray under 15. So I only spent 3 years at Hoppers Crossing. And then when I was 15, I sort of played in a rep team locally for the Western region, and didn't go that well. And I was sort of had to work a lot on aspects of my game. I was a little bit soft and outside, and was sort of told that in no uncertain terms, as you do back in that era, coming through the 80s and early 90s. No one held back in their feedback to you at that point. So I had to work through a few things. I went and tried out, I should say, for Williamstown under 19s in the VFA, and turned up on their doorstep, as you could back in the day, and walked in and asked to train, and made their list over the pre-season, and then played a year of under 19s footy. Played 4 reserves games that year at Williamstown, and that was probably the biggest stepping stone for me in my football, in terms of confidence, being able to handle getting a whack behind the ear, older guys, training with older guys, playing against older guys, especially those reserves games, which were pretty full on, as you could imagine, VFA footy back in the day. The reserves guys at a 30 and coming towards the end of their career, and a little 16-year-olds running around. Yeah. So it was intense but good. And then I went back and played. Got invited to the Western Jets in 93, end of 92, trained there, and was just confident against kids my own age again after playing some senior footy the year before. And so at 15, I was sort of a bit in limbo, and then at 17, I was drafted to the Bulldogs. So it sort of turned around pretty quickly.
Who did you look up to at the Bulldogs, and what sort of player did you look up to and try to emulate, Brad, when you were that age?
When I was younger, Granny was my favourite by a long way, because he was just starting out at the Dogs when I was, say, 14, 15, kicking 50 goals in his first year of footy. So a guy that was only 3 or 4 years older than myself, I'm watching him going, wow, how good is this guy, and what he was able to do in his first year of footy, Turtle. So he was one that I looked up to. Dougie Hawkins was another one. Steve McPherson I had a little bit to do with through some junior pathway programs, because Steve was so big in the community with his Bulldogs community stuff that he used to run. So I crossed paths with Steve a little bit. So knowing him in a small way was someone I certainly watched closely as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And Brad, you went at pick number 11 to the club you ended up barracking for, which would have been an incredible thrill and honour. And I remember seeing your face watching that the Channel 7 coverage of it back in the day, and seeing your flushed cheeks and how excited you were at that time, and just thinking, what an incredible honour. It could have gone very differently, because I know that there are a couple of other clubs that were really keen on you, the Cats, the Crows, and Melbourne were tossing the coin at pick 10 just before we got you, and they ended up going for Trent Orman-Allen, who ended up playing only 8 games for them. So it could have been a very different story. But, what a thrill. How was it to walk in on your first day as a Bulldog supporter, now becoming a Bulldog player?
Matt, I'm glad you didn't mention the shirt that I was wearing on draft night. That's for starters, because looking back now, I thought I was cool, but it was an absolute shocker.
Well, I'm gonna edit that shirt in, Brad, so everyone's
Thank you, Brad.
it right now.
No worries. That's no worries at all. Please do it. Top button was done up. Nice floral arrangement, I think it was. So, but anyway, look, it's a big year, your draft year. Like I said, it happened pretty quickly for me. And I was 17 when I got drafted. I was in year 11 at school. So there was a lot going on sort of in my life at that particular point and trying to understand and grasp it all. And we had every club pretty much every club sit in our lounge room during that year when they're allowed to start recruiting, and and we'd offer them the cup of tea and a biscuit and have a chat about things. And probably the Adelaide Crows were there 2 or 3 times. So they showed just a little bit of interest from that perspective. The Cats were just down the road, so I spoke to them a few times as well. And the Dogs was only literally not even a 1 minute phone call with Mark Kleiman, who was heading up recruiting at that stage. And it was the night before the draft, and he goes, if you're around, will you come to the Dogs? And I said, absolutely. And he goes, no worries, see you later. That was literally the phone call. That was it. So it was really quick from the Dogs. And then I didn't expect to go first round at all, even though being invited to the draft, you're a bit nervous about, where you'll go. And lucky enough to get picked up early, and the stress gone, and away you go. It becomes a reality very quickly after that.
A couple of things there, Brad. Just quickly, you said you were at year 11, so I thought did that change? I thought it was just you had to be year 12 to get drafted.
Yeah, no, that changed. It changed a few years afterwards, I think. So that was, so I went to school. It was sort of in a period where I went to school in Geelong at Chanel College, it was called. It was on Corio side of Geelong. So we would go from, I'd travel up every day and then get home on the bus. And then my mum would either take me to training, or a teammate, Nigel Callett, would pick me up and take me to training. So there was that sort of arrangement early on. I was able to complete my year 12, no dramas. We trained at night, 3-4 times a week. So I was able to sort of do it all. And then it was a struggle at one particular point throughout that early part of my first year, but worked through that with the club, and then was able to sort of get things going, get steady, and play towards the end of my first year.
And I just love the vision of those scouts that missed out on you from Adelaide and Geelong. It must be, you must have provided a lifelong of misery for them as you played your 300 games.
I hope so. No, that's the plan, isn't it? When you go to a club, anyone that sat in your lounge room that didn't call your name out, well, that's on them. It's part and parcel of it all. You mentioned Trent Orman-Allen before. He played for South Australia. Actually took the biggest mark I've ever seen from a junior in that in Teal Cup that year. It was phenomenal. He had an unbelievable draft year, Trent Orman-Allen. It's amazing, isn't it, when you mention names from the past, how there's little things that you sort of remember about them when you played against them.
And look, you play your first game in round 18 of the 94 season against the Magpies. Tell us about that day for you. Your dream come true. Yeah,
it was a big day. The week before, Hawke broke the games record for the club, and I was sort of thereabouts from getting a game. And so that particular game, I think Rowan Smith broke his collarbone. So I was sort of next in terms of the replacement for Smitty. It was a big day that we know, because it was Tony Shaw's record-breaking game as well. So there were, tens of thousands of Collingwood fans. It was a packed house at Whitten Oval. So it was a big thrill. It really was. So I played on the wing. I remember Libba giving my first kick in footy, kicked it to Bevo. Outside of that, everything else is pretty much a blur, to be honest. But you never forget those few moments, and the adrenaline rush is just ridiculous. Really is, and so it takes a bit to get used to that. But it's something, once you experience it once, you just want it again and again, because it was just so much fun.
Yeah, I was there that day, Brad, and I remember you cleared it out to the Dougie Hawkins wing to to the now coach, and what a way to start, hitting him lace out there, and it was wonderful. And just in your 8th game, then you ended up playing finals, so you got a taste of it really early. What was the was it like running out in a final? And that game was an absolute came right down to the wire from memory as well.
Yeah, well, the first one was against Geelong, so we had a great team back then. It was full of experience. So playing the Cats, they got the jump on us, and then we're able to sort of work our way back and hit the front late through Richard Osborne. And unfortunately, Billy Brownless kicks one after the siren, which obviously hurt deeply. And then the following week we played Melbourne Footy Club, and they just destroyed us. Gary Lyon kicked 10, I think, the 3/4 time, and they took him off, or he took himself off from what he tells me these days. So it was a great experience. But then off the back of that, we had a few of us go back and play in the twos. Yeah. So we played a prelim final against Fitzroy, and then we smashed them, and then went on to play North Melbourne in the grand final and won the flag for the club in the twos. So, that was my only ever grand final as a junior, senior. Played in a couple as juniors, but didn't play in a win. So to play in a win, my first ever grand final win was huge. To do it in the colours was even better. It would have been nice then to go on and do it at senior level, but we gave it a crack. But it was a great first year. Had learned so much in my time in the early stages.
So 94 wasn't meant to be for you, Brad, but 85, you quickly established yourself as a permanent fixture in the team. You played 21 games en route to the finals. What were some of your memories? And a second part of that question is, at what game did you realise, or what game number did you feel like you had arrived as a player and felt like you deserved a role every week?
It was one step back, I suppose, in 95. Like Alan Joyce taught me some few footy lessons that year, which now you look back on and you appreciate at the time, as hard as it is getting dropped, and understanding the pure feedback that can come your way from a senior coach. So dealing with that was huge in my second year of footy. Things were rolling nicely, then all of a sudden you're out of the team and you start questioning yourself. But the support was pretty cool in terms of just getting back, what you got to do, the response, and then you go straight back into the team. So you understand that in that second year of footy. It's probably not until you're sort of starting to get to years 4 and 5 before you really feel like you're going to be playing well enough week in, week out to get a senior game. And you're probably realising then that, not that you want to play a bad one, if you play 2 or 3 poor ones in a row, you've got enough body of work behind you to step out of that at some point. So the coach is back in a little bit more when you start to get into that period of playing for 4 or 5 years.
And how did you get yourself out of form while you're talking about that? What sort of, did you have some circuit breakers? Did you just keep persisting, train harder, more skill work?
It was more just learning about yourself and what works for you, to be perfectly honest. And that's what you build up over 4 or 5 years. It's always changing. You got to have a bit of flexibility with that as well. And you start sort of rolling through. Playing interstate was hard early because you need a routine, and you haven't seen these grounds ever in your life. So there's those elements that come into it. I remember going to the SCG for the first time, and what I visualised on TV and saw, I thought the ground was one way and it was completely the other. When I turned up, I'm thinking to myself, what is going on here? So, and you play poorly off the back of that. But no, I was taught early by, Granny, Smitty and Westy were brilliant for me early on. And, they just taught me the aspects around the things that don't take talent in footy is what will set you up and prepare you. And then while you're there, the talent and other things will step forward post that. So I built a really strong base to my preparation. So if I played poorly, I knew I had, it was just hopefully a one-off, and I'll be able to restructure myself to get going again the following week.
Beautiful. Well, you certainly developed a fair bit of continuity, because in 1996 you played every game there, and unfortunately the club ourselves, we weren't travelling quite as well. And I think it was probably around 17 of that season. Alan Joyce, who you've just mentioned, was moved on, and Plough jumped into the driver's seat, and that was the famous day of the I'll spew up. Can you remember that day? And was this a real turning point in the club's fortunes? Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Well, the whole year was big. It was the year of the dog video, which we've all seen. That was 96. So we had so much going on in that year. And then, look, Alan Joyce, as I said, he gave me my first crack in footy. You can only appreciate and love that from that aspect. And it didn't quite work out. Plough jumped in and coached the final part of that season. He just sort of coached it out, Plough, and waited really until the end of the year to really stamp his authority on the way that he wanted to do things with us. And that game was probably set a little bit of a tone, I suppose, because he wasn't going to accept how poorly we were going and how well we played that day. still wasn't good enough. And maybe that was a little bit of that year where if we played okay, you'd get a bit of a pat on the back because, you know, we're not too far away. But all we did was beat Fitzroy in 96. So we're pretty average as a team. And then, so off the back of that, that started to build some different standards that we had to go to. And it wasn't until he got us back in October that year, which was unheard of, in 96 to start training us, that we all went to different, you know, fitness levels and our strength went to a whole new level. And so you, all of a sudden you start breaking some barriers down individually for the way you are physically about yourself. And everyone did that. And then the collective, then bringing all that together was quite significant leading into that 97 season. So Plough was, you know, phenomenal with his innovation and all those sort of things in changing the game. And he had a fair impact on that.
97 was a great year for you, Brad. You become a genuine star of the competition. It's the last ever game down at Ted Whitten Oval, and you have a heartbreak prelim. Tell us about that feeling and what that year was like for you.
I'm smiling about the game at the Whitten Oval, the last one. Although as hard as it was still great to be a part of, knowing the fact that it was going to be the last game of for 4 points at the Whitten Oval. So there was a lot of emotion attached to that game against the West Coast Eagles. You know, all the visions out there to prove that. But you know, to see a packed house one final time at the Whitten Oval was sensational. To have a big win was even better, and to celebrate that. 97 was just you look back at the rise from finishing 15th, I think we did the year before, to then making a prelim was something we're all still coming to grips with, I think, as a playing group, because it happened pretty quickly. No one expected us to go from where we did to the position we were in. Come prelim weekend, yeah, look, we in some ways, you know, we blew that ourselves because we were so far up at 3/4 time in those days that we should never have dropped it. We did. Adelaide Crows come, we couldn't halt their momentum, and yeah, it was extremely disappointing off the back of a big year, but we learned so much as a young group that we knew we'd be able to start backing that up consistently and continue on. But unfortunately, we just weren't good enough to, you know, take that next step and play in a grand final.
There's 100 quarters in 25 games of footy, and up until that last quarter in the prelim, there had only been one other quarter for the entire season where we hadn't scored a goal. Now you'd put the house on it that in that last quarter we'd kick one, and that would be the difference between us getting to the last dance. There are 6 chances that went begging in that last quarter, Brad, and I know it's like opening up a wound, but can you recall a couple of them? You know, particularly the obviously the famous Tony Liberatore behind. I think you were standing in the goal square at the time. I think aside from a drone, you're probably the best person who can say whether this is home or not. So please put us out of our misery.
Yeah, no, I've said all the way along that you're right. Sorry, first off, you're right about the 6 points. That's our opportunity there. You know what I mean? Like we just didn't nail an opportunity. We had some easier opportunities in that last quarter that we missed, and that Libba one for me was through. I've said that my whole life, but the reality is the umpire called it the other way. So you know, I think he saw it potentially that went over the post. I saw it just inside the post, but that's the nature of the call that was made, and we had to unfortunately live with it. Libba doesn't celebrate like that if it's not true. You know, that's not in his nature. So. You know, Libba was just as well placed as I was, you know, kicking the ball and then sitting right behind it to know that it had gone through.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the reality of it. And it's part of our journey. We don't mind talking about it because it's just, you know, it's just part of life.
Yeah, I refused to talk about it until 2016. Before then, we just buried those cassettes of that match, that's for sure. But things turned around, and sometimes, you know, that's your story, as you say, and it's sweeter when you wait longer. So, we didn't have to wait very much longer to go to a prelim final again, Brad. So in 1998, we made it, and we faced the same enemy in the Crows, and Rob Ryn and the Crows got a hold of us that day. You know, at the end of it, were you able to reflect after 98 to say what was the missing ingredients really for us to be able to go that extra step?
Oh, look, you're so close. Top 4 footy it's hard. You're playing against 3 other teams that have had equally as good a year as what you have. So it's just tough football, and we just weren't on the right end of it. Adelaide that day, Andrew McLeod turned it on, and yeah, so look, it's just the reality of who we came up against. We had we prepared ourselves mentally for a bit of retribution. I remember in 98 after what happened in 97, and ultimately it was 97 was our opportunity, and we missed that one. At 98, we were well and truly beaten quite easily by the Crows. So, once again, it was just one of those things. 97 we blew, 98 we were just beaten by a team that excelled on the day, and we didn't.
In 99 and 2000, Brad, you played in some amazing matches there, including the famous match against Essendon, where you had some tactics in place from Terry Wallace. Tell us a little bit about what it was like being in the rooms at that time and the way that game played out.
Oh, look, that game was amazing to be a part of. We did all our preparation away from the footy club because Plough was scheming the massive flood that we were going to create on the Essendon Footy Club. So, we executed it quite well. We had a week to practice it pretty much. Our execution for 3 quarters was pretty good. I remember at quarter time, a few of the Essendon players like Mark McCurry and Joe Mercedes were sort of, talking to us on the side going, what are you boys up to today? What are you doing? Any danger you can attack? And so all that sort of banter was happening out on the field. But Essendon they just got away from us a little bit. I remember specifically at 3/4 time, Plough getting us in and saying to us, look, we've executed quite well at this point, but now we go and play. And he just absolutely freed up the shackles after three-quarter time. And we're able to get back into the game. I think we caught Essendon off guard at the start. They worked through that. We caught them off guard in that last quarter and we're able to come back. And obviously Granny kicks the most unbelievable goal on the left foot to put us in front. And then Smitty kicks one after the siren to win by 7 or 8 points, I think it was. So it was fantastic to be a part of that particular game.
Yeah, and I noticed just after Smitty kicked that goal, you didn't run over to him and your teammates to celebrate. In fact, you made, this is the only time I've ever seen you angry, Brad, and I didn't think you had it in you. You ran straight over to Johnny Barnes, didn't you? I've tried to lip read, but tell us what.
I think it's pretty obvious what I can say, Matt. But he got me quite well just before half time. So, and it was a bit off the ball. So Scotty Wine and the like weren't too happy with it. That fired things up. And look, it was the biggest spray I've ever copped from a couple of teammates, and Plough was after that particular game. And it was probably right as well when you think back on it. Yeah, I was caught up in the emotion of the game. I copped the heavy one we use that now. I copped the heavy one to the head at that particular point. And it was out of character a little bit for the way that I would normally go about it. You're right with that. So I shouldn't have done it because ultimately it took away from what was a massive win for the club. And that was the feedback, the strong feedback I got at that particular point was, we've just beaten Essendon. We've broken their run. And here you are, instead of celebrating with your teammates, you're off, what could have caused anything. Who knows what could have happened if Barnesy had to come at me, you know what I mean? So it was pretty selfish. I agree with that. And when I look back on it, it's probably as big as the game was, it's probably my biggest regret that I ever had was, going over to him instead of celebrating with my mates.
Yeah, well, look, there were other moments in your career where there were huge rivalries, and you got right behind your teammates. I know that there was a couple of matches just a year later, particularly against the Tigers, where Tony Liberatore and Dimmer and Jose really got under Matty Knight's skin. We've got rivalry rounds coming up in a couple of weeks from now. Can you tell us a little bit about that Bulldog DNA that comes out when we're backs to the wall?
Yeah, look, Libba was an unbelievable teammate. He was strong. He was super competitive, like seriously competitive. So was Jose and Dimmer, both in different ways, but equally as strong, committed to the cause, which is half the battle. You get guys that are committed to the cause and believe in the direction you're trying to go, and they were senior players, then that filters right through very quickly. So those guys were unbelievable teammates, obviously not liked by the opposition, but as is always, when you've got some teammates like that, they're awesome. And the oppo don't like them. So, they were able to, the good thing about those guys is that as much as we supported them when needed, and that's one of my true beliefs in footy, that you pull the jumper on, you're supporting the next guy that pulls it on as well. But those guys also had the ability to look after themselves pretty well, which was a bonus. So So that was the thing. They played hard. And look, I before Matty Knights actually went to the West Coast Eagles recently, I lived 3 doors from him. So it's and we get along really well. We've never spoken about that incident, though, I must admit, but it's funny, isn't it, how the footy world circulates and you cross paths with various people at different stages of life.
So no Sunday night men shed beers there, Brad, I take it.
No.
Nowhere near it.
No, we've never spoken about it, never will speak about it. I remember at the end of that year, actually, we ended up going for our post-season drinks, and we ended up at the same pub as Richmond, I think it was. So because Leon Cameron had moved, I think, over to the Tigers. So that was interesting in itself. No trouble in the end, but a bit of tension at particular points.
Brad, talking about Knightsy and the love you had for your fierce teammates, who were some of the players that you played against, played on, that you loved and you admired, but also players that gave your life a hard time every time you met them on a footy field?
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't have state footy anymore, and it's a bit of a shame in my book, because I was able to play in the last 3 state games and played with some guys that, you know, you admired from afar, and to be able to train with them and play with them took your own standards to another level. Same with international rules. So we went to international rules in 98, and Adelaide had just beaten us for the second time in a prelim, and they've got about 5 guys that are representing Australia, and there's a few of us going, wow. But by the end of it, you know, they're just good guys. You know, at the end of the day, they're playing hard for their team. You mightn't appreciate what they do to you on field, but off field, you know, 99% of guys that we either played against or then represented with, either at state level or Australian level, just ripping guys. And our relationships with the Adelaide guys probably were the closest that we got. They roomed me with Mark Rashudo. I had no choice but to speak to the guy. But he's one of the most intimidating figures that I've come across, and an absolute awesome guy. Like, you can see why Adelaide were the way they were, because he's the type of guy that brings everyone in. He had a real passion for success, and they're the sort of things you learn from rooming with these guys and playing with them and all that sort of stuff. So same with the Essendon guys in 2000 when we beat them. We then travelled with them. You know what I mean? And it's a bit cold early the first couple of sessions, and then everyone warms up with each other, and away you go. So
they don't give you a handball. They don't give you a handball or kick the ball to you, mate.
Not early, no. They'll avoid you, as we did with them. But then eventually, you know, when James Hurd starts calling for the ball, you got no choice but to give it to him. He's an absolute superstar.
Yeah. Now, after a succession of finals appearances, Brad, we had a bit of a lean trot, didn't we, in around 2001 to 2005, despite having, you know, an incredible amount of talent on our list. And then the power shifted, and you were bestowed the captaincy of the club. Can you tell us a little bit about the honour of actually that handover, and how it actually came to be that you became the captain?
Yeah, look, it probably ended up working out in some ways quite good. The transition was quite easy. Rodney took over as coach, and he sort of pitted Das and I, not against each other, but sort of said, you two guys are probably who I'm looking at to captain the club moving forward. And Rocket chose Das at the end of pre-season. That was fine. I spoke to Rocket about that. I'd sort of gone through deputy vice captain to vice captain, and was obviously, you know, hoping to take that next step. It didn't sort of come my way. It went Das's way. And, you know, I sort of said to Rocket, well, what do you want me to do from a leadership perspective here? He goes, no, I want you still just to lead under Das and see what happens through the next couple of years. And Das did his knee. So Das would then do all the off-field stuff and focus on that, his rehab, but also going to functions and events and schools and doing all that, where I'd just captain and do everything during the week. And I just captain match day for 2 hours, pretty much, or 2.5 hours. So it was in some ways good for myself, because I learned the on-field stuff and not let the captaincy affect my performance, and how I can do things a little bit, you know, try and do things as well as possible on field without the stress then of all the off-field stuff that comes with it. So that was that went for a year and a half. Das did his knee again and decided to hand everything over because he wanted to focus on trying to get back to play footy. So that transition then was quite smooth, quite easily. I already had a fair bit of experience on match day. It was just then trying to deal with everything as skipper. My first year, I learned a lot and things that I was doing a lot. I was probably doing a few things wrong and not leading in the right way. So we worked through that with the club and some teammates and turned things around from my second year onwards. And it was really good, really positive, and I love the experience, of course.
When you talk about not leading in the right way or not, what could you maybe talk about? What were some little instances there, Brad, that you could discuss?
I probably just put too much on my own shoulders, to be honest with you. And
yep.
We started to climb a little bit in terms of our performance, which was great under Rocket. We all went to levels we didn't really expect to go to. And I probably wasn't at that particular time, my first year, bringing the other leaders underneath along as much as possible for the ride. Trying to do it probably too much myself, as I said, and more of that was to do with a lot of the off-field stuff, more so than on-field. On-field was going okay. So it wasn't until I started to do that from the second year on and brought the likes of, Murph and Gia and Bordy and these blokes, gave them more responsibility. In a way they went, we just thrived. It actually helped me personally as well. So it wasn't until, that change was made. And those boys gave me that feedback. They wanted to actually learn, and they're the future of the club. So it was good to get that. It was good to listen to it and appreciate it. And we did things a bit differently from that point on.
Well, I certainly agree with you. In 2006, you kicked 74 goals. You runner-up in the Coleman Medal, named All-Australian captain. What was that like for you? What was it like to be captain of the best players in the country? I mean, what is that hard to comprehend?
Yeah, of course it is. But it was a year where Rocket tactically that year, we all started to uncover a whole new level of footy. I was 28, so I'm thinking I'm at my ceiling. This is the type of footy I'm going to play forever. Might be able to kick 30 to 50 a year and be quite comfortable with that. But he took us all to a level that we didn't even know. And it was more around the tactics, the way we set up individually, what we can do with our opponents as well tactically, to exploit them. So all those things just played out really well in that year. Personally, we started to get a lot more ball forward to centre, which was good as well. And to clean a lot of that up was, it was a great feeling. And then look, to make All Australians a fantastic honour. It's off the back of being involved in a pretty good team, though. We all got to understand that. And the position I played was so reliant on everybody else playing their role and playing at a high level to get it down. So there are always bonuses to get that, and it was an extra bonus to be named as captain in that year. A total surprise, didn't expect it, didn't walk in with even a thought in my mind that would come about. So it was a huge surprise and a great honour to be named in that role.
I'm really fascinated by the psyche of really good footballers, and I'm a teacher, and both Maddie and I are interested in how we get the best out of our kids and having a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. But I'm just fascinated about what sort of mindset do you have when it comes to stepping up and taking when you watch Bonts, for example, in the last couple of games, just you could literally see him drag his team over the line. What do you have to have in your mind to be able to do that as a player? What happens to be able to step up in those big occasions and elevate yourself to another level? I
think one, you've got to remain calm during the week, because the emotions of footy are it's win-loss based, and it can be quite set up by the coaches as well, depending on performance. But when you get to sort of the level of what you're talking about with Bont, for example, I was in Sydney the week before and watched the guys live, saw them in the hotel afterwards, and it was the most disappointed I've ever seen the group post a loss. Yeah. And I'm sort of sitting there going, okay, well, in some ways that's really good because they're hurting really bad, but then it's turning the hurt into motivation to then be able to turn that around really quickly within 7 days. And a lot does go to the leaders, and it goes to your captain as well. So you can sort of see that Bont set a bit of a tone without knowing what it was throughout the week leading into the Essendon game we just won. And then his performance was outstanding, but it wasn't so much what he did on attack. It was going back with the flight of ball 5 times in defence to stand in front of Peter Wright and a few of their other forwards to then bring the ball to ground and go. If he doesn't do that and set that sort of tone first, then they probably score and we're in a different position and we're talking about things differently. So he set the tone like that. Then you see Bailey Smith jump on board and had his best tackling game that we've seen all year, and his work rate was back to its very best. And Caleb Daniel was using it well, and Bailey Dale and Edwin. So we can talk about all these guys, but I think it's off the back of, Bont setting a tone during the week that then all the other leaders bought into would have sold that as well. So I think he was calm in a really interesting situation. And that's the way it was when we were playing as well. If you remain calm, but you remain strong in your mindset, and your delivery has to be really strong at times, that the other players understand it. They see it. It's just then how you actually turn that into a positive execution the following week. And, that's where the boys were outstanding, I thought, coming off the loss to then turning it around to defeating Essendon quite comfortably in the end.
So I hear for you, it's setting the tone when you were the captain. That was the key thing for you as well.
Yeah, that's it. You have to be in line with the coach. You have to have a good relationship with the coach, and an honest one as well. And then from that, it's the other leaders around, I think, which certainly assist telling that, setting that pathway. But to be honest, every player understands the situation and understands the situation you're in. It's just then how the collective are going to get you out, because one person's not, two people aren't. It's going to be, the 22 of the 44 that start buying into it. And then all of a sudden you got 30. And so the group goes together rather than, the individual having to work their way through it to, change the fortunes of the footy club.
Yeah, beautiful, Brad. And speaking of executing, in 2008, in the opening round there, you executed in a way that you hadn't before. You had a career high 8 goals, and the feeling around the club at that point was just palpable, not only around you, but our prospects. And we had 3 years in a row that we ended up, making the prelim. Can you remember that particular day and just how you absolutely lit up the game against the Cats?
I was off a big summer. That's it. As simple as that. You feel good about yourself. You've got a nice tan. You're looking good. So it's honestly round one is it's amazing. It's a full summer of build of grind and hard work to finally get to pull the jumper on for the first time in that year. So the energy's always there. And like I said, though, we had a midfield group that was really starting to become quite powerful, still developing, but becoming better and better year on year under Rocket. And, that particular day, the service I got was very good, played on some, and I thrived on playing on the very best defenders. And that particular day with Matty Scarlett and Tom Harley, who were stars of the competition, it was good to sort of, get one up on them, because they certainly destroyed me a few times in the past as well. So it was always good to, start the season really well and kick a bag. And we end up with 4 points walking off. And that's the challenge. You want to get 4 points as quick as possible in this competition. And to get them first up is, was really positive.
And we know what happens when you don't, bro, don't we? In the media these days, when you lose a couple of games. Now, very quickly, you were called the smiling assassin. I've always been fascinated, Brad, with your happy disposition. Where do you get that from? Was that just being around a happy family, or did you? What it's about inner happiness or inner well-being, isn't it? Tell me about that smiling, that wonderful smile that people associate with you.
Yeah, honestly, it's just because I'm around footy all the time, so it's purely my love for that. And my love for the game is enormous. My love for my teammates was probably even bigger, and my passion for the club. It was 3 simple things really, and it's still the same. It's still the same today. It'll never change. Hopefully, it never does. And as serious as the game was, and as serious as I was about performance and winning and all those sort of things, I probably had the mindset to let it go a little bit quicker than what others could, just to then get going again the following week or the following session or whatever it was. And, I had some poor performances, had bad training sessions, fought through different injuries at different stages, and you're down on yourself and all those sort of things. But I was able to get through them reasonably quickly to bounce back to who I was. And I was told early, you don't have to change. This is who you are.
Yeah.
You don't have to be anything other than that. And, I live by that throughout, my whole career and life to date. I just love it.
Tell us about some of your best goals. Have you got a catalogue that you can walk us through some of the greats that you kicked, or the lucky ones, or the ones that were really important for you?
I've got 2 that I missed after the siren. So we will just park those, okay, for now. We won't talk about those, please. They'll make me sweat. So, look, the one off the ground against the Brisbane Lions is probably my favourite. And then the one that put us in front against Adelaide Crows in round 1 in my 300s probably sits second to that one. So, yeah, but other than that, like it's it's a great feeling, no doubt. Sometimes you close your eyes and just throw your boot at it and it works out. Yeah. Sometimes you mean it. And that's just the nature of, opportunity that comes, and you hope sometimes your instincts take over and you execute well. And there's nothing better than celebrating something that has gone through that, can help the boys.
We talk about Sam Kerr in the World Cup, volleying off the ground. You just spoke about that one against the Lions, but there was also that other huge one out of midair that I think Granty tapped it back to you, and from about 40 out, you just flushed it when there's a drop punt post height.
It set up beautifully. There was no use grabbing it. I would have, it just sat there nicely, technically wise, so I could just basically go through the technique without the ball in my hands and launch it. So he just teed it up nicely for me, Turtle. He tapped it back and there it was, just standing up and down. We know what the ball can do at different stages, but it just sat beautifully.
I think the boys were at the club a couple of weeks ago. A little media thing came out about the boys looking at that vision and trying to do the same thing, replicate the kick. I think Brucey was having a go and they were kicking it all over the joint, Brad. So it was one of those perfect moments, wasn't it?
It was just one of those things where it just everything went well and it was the right moment. You know what I mean? If you're a split second late, it doesn't happen. You're early, it definitely doesn't happen. So it was just everything just worked out nicely.
Yeah. Now you alluded just a little bit earlier about your 300th game. You put us in front a couple of times. You kicked 5 that day. You joined EJ and Chrissy Grant and Scotty West and Dougie. Can you tell us how amazing that fairy tale day was for you?
Oh, it was good. The club was amazing. It really was. The way they brought the family in and my kids and my wife was sensational. So the whole week was just good fun, really good fun. And then look, I didn't get a kick for the first half, so I had to do something. I had to regroup at half time and work it out. And we got rolling and in the end, we were lucky to win because I think it's Nathan Bock had a shot after the siren for the Crows. Lucky it was deep on the boundary and he missed it. So we were able to celebrate. It was a good fight back and it was a really good win. And what Adam Cooney did that day was sensational. I'll never forget that. He was bursting out of the middle. He was hitting blokes lace out in that second half. I was lucky to be on the end of a couple as well, and a couple fell my way. Look, I was standing in the goal square a couple of times and my opponent went and spoiled it and he hit it straight to me twice. So, sometimes things happen and you just got to be in the right place and put yourself around the footy and some things can happen for you.
Look, you reached the prelim in 2009, Brad. You had a sensational year. Your leadership was incredible. You had breakout. You broke the club games record. You were elevated as a Bulldog immortal. How was this season looking back at some of those really big occasions for you?
Oh, look, the occasions were great. To watch the first when EJ flicked the ball to Dougie at the Whitten Oval when he broke the record in 94, and then to watch it again and be playing when the honour went to Granny, and then to be a part of that when Ted Whitten Jr. flicks it to Doug, who flicked it to Granny, who flicked it onto me. So it was great to be part of that tradition. It really was. Get goosebumps sort of thinking about it now. So it was pretty special to play in that game and to break the record at that particular point. And look, we had 08, 9 and 10 were awesome years for the footy club. We didn't. 09 was the opportunity where we hit the front in the last quarter against the Saints before Nick Rewalt kicks those couple, I think it was, to break our hearts. But 09 was our real opportunity. 08 we were sort of developing again. 09 was the sweet spot that we didn't capitalise on. And then 10 we were more just beaten up. But leading the boys at that particular point in those 3 prelims, honestly, I look back and I couldn't have been prouder of the way they just had a crack. And that's all you want. Like, we didn't get the result, and that's really disappointing. And that still sits deep with a few of us. But you look at the performance and you go, we executed as well as what Rocket asked of us. him as a coach, you'd ask him, I reckon he'd be pretty proud of what we did in those games to get ourselves in position to compete. So it sits a little bit more comfortably, I suppose, in some ways, because of the effort that was put in by the entire group for a big 3-year period. But ultimately, it wasn't the outcome we all wanted by not taking that next step and playing in a granny.
Yeah, in 09, it could have gone either way, couldn't it? You just spoke about Rewalt kicking a couple of goals there. How much does luck play a part? We've broached this with Acker recently, and also with Tony Liberatore. Just moments where maybe an umpire will make a decision with Brian Lake giving a little bump, or a left, almost a Shane Warne leg break with a ball bouncing out of bounds and then being called deliberate. These are moments that, if they'd gone slightly the other way, it could have been a different story. Do you feel luck is part of the game?
Yeah, a little bit. Look, the first one with Nick, that just broke a little bit of momentum. Goals were hard to come by, and we had them on toast with the way that we were moving the ball. We're doing things a little bit differently that night. It was working. Everyone was on song, and that just got them a cheap one that, that wasn't there ultimately. And that's just the reality of, what happened on that particular night. You're right about the bounce of the ball as well. So yeah, it does. Yeah, ultimately it does. But as much as you can sit there and whinge and complain and all that sort of stuff, it does not change the fact that, we didn't win that. We didn't win that night. We got 7 points up in the last quarter. So, it's on us to close it out, and we didn't.
Yeah. Moving on from there, and Brad and we were talking about, Matt and I were talking about golf recently, but an unlikely source accelerated towards you in what looked like a runaway golf cart that perhaps brought on your retirement, and we'll talk about that in a second. Tell us about that incident. Is it true that you got collected by a golf cart and sustained an injury? And
it's on YouTube. You can see it. It definitely happened. Look, it wasn't. I didn't get hit that hard, but it just had a little box underneath the front, and it just hit my Achilles. And I was battling my Achilles anyway through the summer. I got back for round 1, got hit by the cart. It just swelled up instantly again. I missed a month of footy, but it was probably, in some ways, the game was telling me something, I think, anyway, at that particular time. I was probably getting to that point anyway, where I remember at the end of 09, I probably set myself for one more big summer. As an older player, maybe pushed a little bit too hard, fought the Achilles for some time, couldn't really get over it, got there, and then had to battle again through the entire season through 2010.
Yeah, well, in 2010, sorry, Paul, in 2010, you were 34, weren't you? And lining up next to you was a man of a similar age in Barry Hall, and also Acker in the other forward pocket. So I think you had an aggregate of 101. That's a lot of experience, Brad. But not many teams line up with a forward line like that. Did you feel that was an advantage, or was it a last roll of the dice?
A little bit of last roll of the dice, I suppose. Barry, if we had got in the year before, having that key presence in the forward line would have been a totally different story. We tried for a couple of years, I think, to try and secure Barry, and I remember even speaking to Matty Lloyd once when he left Essendon, just to sound him out, because that key forward we all knew was probably the missing piece to maybe winning or taking that next step to a granny. So it just, playing with Baz was awesome. He had, although he was, in his 30s, he was running around like he was in his 20s. Honestly, he was as fit as a fiddle, and awesome to play with him for that particular year. It would have been nice to play a couple of years with Baz. But you're right about the age. It was in some ways the last real crack that a few of us were going to get at trying to play in a grand final, and that's probably why a few of us were still on the list at that particular point, because we're in a window of not development. We're in a window of trying to win one. So it's just the nature of, I think, where we're all at.
So talk about those final days. I mean, in one way, an injury is probably a better way to go out than maybe losing form, Brad, and the decline that some players have. So what was that final year for you like? And
Yeah, no, I lost both, mate. Don't worry about that. As much as your mind wants that you want to play at this level, my level was well below that. So it was interesting. I remember during that year, Rodney Eade, speaking to Rodney Eade about him, he put me off for about 8 weeks. I went to him a couple of times. He put me off about eight or 10 weeks. And he was trying to make me stop. I was trying to do everything to get my Achilles right and, going through different programs and bits and pieces. I went to the AIS and did all different things that year to try and get it right. It just wouldn't respond. And he's telling me to stop. He goes, just stop. We just need you for finals. So I stopped for a bit, come good, got sore again with loads. And it wasn't until I actually finished and I did nothing for 2 months and I've never felt my Achilles again. So it was one of those things where you're in that mindset, you work through it. But Rocket was awesome. He was, I think, half sort of trying to get me to seriously think about the decision that I was making in my own mind. And the third time I went to him, that was it. Within an hour, he had a press conference called and we were announcing it. So, but he was brilliant, honestly. I couldn't have got through that year without him.
Yeah.
And he, like I said, he just made me seriously think about that. And if I had have gone on again, I think he would have, and if I had said that, I think he would have accepted it. The year before, had a pretty good year, fell away quite quickly in 2010, and made the call to finish up.
Yeah, well, your name's etched into pretty much every honour board in at the Kennel. So do you leave the game feeling that you're satisfied with all that you achieved, despite not winning the premiership, or is that something that just burns in you?
No, it'll always burn. I think the club winning it in 2016 and having supported the club my whole life, that fills a massive hole for everybody, doesn't it? So, so that was unbelievable to see and experience that. So yeah, personally, yes, of course, it'll always sit there. So 95%, I couldn't have been happier because I gave everything, committed to absolutely everything, and I sit really comfortable with that. The other 5% is obviously not having that opportunity to hold up the cup for the club, because that's what you spend your life doing. You're trying to achieve that ultimate glory, not only for yourself, but for everybody associated with the club. All the staff, all the supporters, everybody. And that's what it's about. That's why we exist. That's why we play the game, so that we walk off with a smile and 30, 40, 50,000 people go home with one as well. And that's seriously what we talk about internally. So it's just part of the journey, as I've mentioned a couple of times. And so 95% was really good. 5% was a missed opportunity in some ways.
Brad, what you left the club, you played with some amazing players over that era. Could you just talk about some of those players that you loved playing with and how much you admired them?
Oh, look, so I played with so many. I'd missed some along the way, but the ones that had the biggest impact on me were Granny, Smitty and Westy, especially early on. And then throughout we played a lot of footy together, which was great. And then probably as it sort of started to shift a little bit, the dynamic of the footy club, Daniel Jones-Siracusa was just a sensational guy, excellent player. Bob Murphy, the standards he got to. Then you got the likes of Dale Morris, who was just so intense and so competitive. And then Ryan Hargrave down back. And then you got Matty Boyd and Daniel Cross, who were extremely hard working in the midfield. Then you had the flair and talent of Griffin and Cooney, and then Higgins comes in as a youngster who could use the ball as well as anyone. And Lindsay Gilby was the best kick I've probably ever seen, coming off half back, and the way he just laced you out consistently. Him and Rowan Smith were on par with the way they kicked the ball. So I could go on and on about so many, teammates that we played a lot of footy together. And, you make some fantastic relationships and mates from, the game that we love.
Yeah, and does that include some of the early days as well? Because, you've mentioned probably the last 6 or 7 years of your career, when you walk through the doors, idolising some of those players. I guess, how is it to actually be able to play alongside them and not only admire them, but be able to be their teammate and hold your end up at the bargain?
It was weird early, Matt, to be honest with you. Doug Hawkins led me into the rooms for the first time, and he actually sat me next to him at locker 6, and I was quickly picked up and moved to 33 very quickly to the other side of the room. So it was, So that was the nature of it. When you first start, you hang around with the guys you drafted with. Within a few years, I was the only one left of the group that I walked through the doors with, and then sort of, you know, as myself and Das and a few others that sort of built some really strong relationships with each other, and we're going similar age, going through the same stuff. So that was good. Simon Garlick was another one at that particular point, came over from Sydney, and he was an awesome guy and teammate. But I was sort of lucky that in my first few years, Steve McPherson, who I mentioned, I had a relationship with, small one through junior, so he helped me a lot. Steve Wallace, though, in my first few years, had the biggest influence on me. Steve would spend at least 1 to 2 hours post every session just kicking with me, getting me up to speed. So it's a lot of those things that no one sees. The lights go out, but he still got me out there kicking and ground balls and, you know, teaching me how to protect myself in the contest and use my back and all these things that you need to learn as a youngster coming in. Steve Wallace was probably the biggest one to do that. And then Choco Raw came back as an assistant coach and grabbed me and did a lot of that sort of stuff as well. So, you know, there's a lot of guys that would give of themselves to help us youngsters find our feet and find our way in a pretty cutthroat competition.
Yeah, well, you certainly did, and that's amazing to hear the who's who of Bulldogs there in your career, Brad. Now you talked about pressure and cutthroat. We're coming close to the end of this podcast, and we're going to put you in the hot seat without a word of warning here, Brad, just to see how you do handle pressure. We're going to give you 60 seconds on the clock, and you're entering the Bulldog Brain Quiz.
You'll need every one of those 364 games here, Brad. I can tell you right now.
Yeah. All right, I haven't been under pressure like this in about 15 years now, so we'll see how we go.
Fantastic. Well, we've had about 20 players who are already on the leaderboard, and Dougie Hawkins sits at the top of the tree, and he lets us know about it, by the way. And, so knock him off, please. There's a portrait that will be painted for the winning player by a famous artist who actually did the 2016 grand final banner, Noel Brazisi. So, Brad, you're in it with a chance here. We're going to give you 2 categories. You can choose which one. It's Bulldog Hall of Fame as category 1, or you can choose Bulldog surnames that start with B.
Oh, crikey. Let's go Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame it is. All right, fantastic. You got 60 seconds on the clock. You can pass.
Okay.
Good luck, Brad.
Starts after the first question. Good luck. The Bulldogs currently have 9 legends in the Hall of Fame. Is that true or is that false?
Oh, true.
It's false. There's 10. You're the 10th one. Former rover. Former rover Georgie Bissett is not an inductee in the Hall of Fame. Is that true or false?
Georgie Bissett. That's false.
Correct. Amit Baines is the chair of selectors for the committee. Is that true or false?
The chair. He's on the committee. I'd say true.
It's true. Legend Alan Hopkins was awarded which medal retrospectively in 1989?
Norm Smith medal?
It was the 1930 Brownlow. Which year was Bulldog champion Tony Liberatore inducted into the Hall of Fame?
Which year?
Same as you.
I can't remember what year I was inducted. 2013.
10. Which club games record holder was elevated to a legend status in 2023?
I was.
Correct. And right on the siren, Brad. We're going to give you the last one. Well done there. The last one here. Good luck. The question is, which legend is also a 6-time winner of the Charles Sutton Medal?
Bulldog 6 times.
6 times.
Gary Dempsey.
He's got it.
Nice work.
Sorry, I had to go through it a bit. Yeah. What year was Liver inducted?
2010, Brad.
10. Okay.
Yeah, 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you are. Fantastic. Hey, well, look at this. We're going to put the scores up on the board now and see where you are. Well, there you are. You're not at the top of the tree, Brad, but you've done a fantastic job. Well done, mate. Congratulations.
Thank you. I maybe should have selected the surname starting with
Meant to
B.
say. I thought the same, Brad.
I can't even really think of Les Bamblett. There's one. Would that
There
be
you go. We've got Les coming on shortly, by the way, too. He's great.
awesome? Awesome.
Before we let you go, I just wanted, you did mention the 2016 flag. Can you tell us how was that as a, as a past player to experience that and as a fan? Tell us about your day there, Brad, and what an amazing event it was.
Oh, it was a phenomenal month, wasn't it? To beat West Coast, then take out Hawthorn, beat GWS on their home deck, and to come away with a massive win was huge. I actually voted on the Norm Smith medal that day, which I was a nervous wreck doing that because I didn't want to get that wrong. And then the emotion of obviously seeing the club do what they did, and it was outstanding. I remember right towards the end, we were sitting sort of not far from some board members who stood up to go down to the rooms, and I said to Donna and the kids, "Come on, we're following these guys." So down we went, and we got in behind them, which was great. And we're on the ground, standing sort of on the boundary line, just witnessing it all at ground level was phenomenal, and it was something we'll never forget. The Sunday session I had with the boys is something I'll never forget as well. But seeing the sea of fans at the Whitten Oval on that Sunday was just out of control. It was so good. So that whole month and a bit was pretty special, and it's something that keeps the club going now for so many years to come. And it breaks the drought for a lot of us. So we can all sit there comfortable at the moment, knowing that we've been able to witness something that we hadn't been able to do for a very long time.
Brad, although you've been out, I just sort of did some estimations, around 13 years, the game has changed a lot, such as protocols of concussion, duty of care, tackling interpretation, players' roles and responsibilities, and the external social media of the game. Is the game in a better place than what it was? And you played through a wonderful era. Can you make some commentary around the comparisons between the two eras and where you see footy these days?
I know they're completely different. The footy's back. Like, we went through a stage where footy was so defensive and hard to score, and was hard to watch and even commentate on, to be perfectly honest. So we're through that. We're out the other side of that, which is great. The coaches have added a bit more attack to the way we do things. We've always been, an 80 to 100 point game. I think if you get into that sort of position every week, we're doing some things right, and we're sort of back in that little spot. We talk a lot at work. A lot of the guys are sort of through that sort of 2000, like 90s, 2000 sort of era. I think we had the sweet spot of the game, to be perfectly honest with you. It was still one-on-one footy. It was, and the way the game was played was awesome to play. It really was. It was so much fun to play it that way. There was still tactics and everything involved and all that sort of stuff, but it was not as probably structured as what we may see today, with the full teams, flowing and what they do, which still would be good to learn and understand. But yeah, certainly, I think when I look at it, I'm just so blessed to have been able to represent in that period of time. It's sort of, you don't know how you go in today's game, So and there's a lot more scrutiny with it, which comes with the territory. But I think they're making the right calls in terms of changing the nature of the game, in terms of looking after players for their post-career. No question whatsoever with any of that. The duty of care is critical. We now know a lot more about it, which we never knew. The research is a lot stronger. It's a lot more efficient, and it's something that we needed to understand, get our heads around, and make the change. And those changes will continue, but I think we've made some really good steps forward to protect the players throughout their careers. So when they step out, the career is so short compared to your life. You want the players to be fruitful and have all aspects of health once they finish playing as well.
Brad, we want to say thank you so much for you joining us. And there's so many Bulldog fans who are absolutely idolise you. What's your final message for Bulldog fans out there, and how would you like to be remembered?
My final message is, it's all around the colours. Like, it's just the love for the colours, to be honest with you, and that's what it's about. That's where our passion is derived from. Whether you're a 4 or 5 year old starting out your supporting journey, or whether you've been supporting for 50, 60, 70 years, it all comes back to our love for the colours, and it's as simple as that. So hopefully we get that opportunity to hold up the cup again very shortly, but knowing that what we do and how much we love the club should never change, regardless of the performance that's happening.
And just for yourself, of how you would like to be remembered, how do you want fans to look back at you?
Oh, it's hard. I sign everything off, keep smiling. You know what I mean? And that's what life's about. So if we can do that, and we can work through some situations together, but come out smiling, then that's what means probably the most to me.
Beautifully said.
Brad Johnson, you're a legend. Our audience is going to absolutely adore this podcast, and thank you very much for your time. You've been very generous. Brad Johnson, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Happy and Brad. Thank you, mate.
Well,
Red in my heart, white in my veins, blue in one eye, red, white, and blue in my brain.